We have one more panel to go, and it's very important. We as Swahili speakers, we get counted. As we know, there's a lot of money from federal government, and that funds is allocated based on the population. And remember, the census is once in 10 years. They don't ask immigration questions. They don't ask your social security. Just get counted. So, and I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge some of our Board of Trustees. Dr. Boaz, Dr. Patrick, and Cleopatra Kuras. Cleopatra Barnes. Whatever you see behind there, Cleopatra was behind that. Thank you so much.
Asante.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cleo. And so we're gonna go straight to the last panel. This is gonna be domestic violence on Swahili speakers, and I would like to have Ms. Joanne Oport, the co-founder and CEO of Africans for Mental Health and a representative from Governor's Commissioner on Africa Affairs, GCOAA. Karibu. And I would love to have Dr. Patrick Nyigula from University of South Carolina, Dalamo School of Business. Karibu. And Ms. Harriet Adamson, mental health professional, therapist in Laurel, Maryland. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. So I'm from Kenya, and my Swahili is rusty. And I wish I could really do interchangeably, but I'm going to work on it to sharpen it. I've been here for a while, so I've been speaking a lot more English. And I think when you're growing up, the challenges, even Mubelwa understands at the back there, that there's always this intimidation when you're sitting next to Tanzanians about your Swahili if you're from Kenya. And so, you know, when we're talking about the ethnocentrism and values and culture and how well you speak your language, it's always good to, you know, to come back and simmer down and understand that, you know, you can also speak the language, and if you need to be corrected, you can be corrected. So my name is Joanne Oport. I've been here a couple of times to some of the Swahili events, and I'm excited to be a part of you, and I'm excited that this organization is out here to really bridge the gap and educate the community about things that are important, such as Census 2020, right? So I'm a commissioner of Governor Larry Hogan's administration. I serve on the Commission on African Affairs, and we are housed under the Governor's Office of Community Initiative in Crownsville, Maryland. I'm also the chair of the Workforce Development and Education Subcommittee. We convene and facilitate resources for the African immigrant space here in the state of Maryland. So we have several subcommittees. We are similar to the Prince George's County Advisory Board. They serve on a county level, and we serve on the overall state level. So there's a health subcommittee, there's a business subcommittee if you're interested in doing trade in Africa. There is a workforce subcommittee, which is, I chair that subcommittee, and there's an arts and culture. So to begin with, I just wanted to share a little bit about how Maryland is now combating domestic violence before we have our panel speakers. Governor Hogan keeps addressing it and seeks actions to prevent tragedies in the future. According to the latest Maryland Uniform Crime Reporting data, 2013 to 2017 revealed a yearly average of 29,848 domestic violence-related crimes and an average of 60 domestic violence-related homicides in the state of Maryland. This is absolutely not acceptable. And so in the administration, I know we're working really hard, and Governor Hogan really is serious about it with the First Lady to make sure that, you know, issues of domestic violence or interpartner violence are addressed in the state of Maryland. For this particular conversation piece, we really want to focus with the immigrant community, the Swahili speakers, and really just get to learn what is domestic violence? What does that really look like, right? What are the signs of domestic violence? What are the what are the repetitive functions in where you're in a space where you've seen domestic violence? Have you seen domestic violence as a child? Are you seeing it now as an adult? And how does it affect how you interact in the private space, meaning your home space, and in your public space, meaning your workspace? So the panel here is well educated, and I'm sure Nima will be able to chime in Swahili as well and share with you what domestic violence is. And, the relationship domestic violence has to mental health. We as a African community space are often afraid of speaking about mental health and mental illness or mental wellness. It's taboo in Kenya, they say, oh, umerogwa, right? Oh, mtu amekwekea dawa, things of that sort. Somebody has put medicine on you, or you've been, there's witchcraft. So, in terms of mental health, mental illness. So I wanted to start with you, Ms. Adamson. Just tell everyone what you do in the mental health space, and I'll go to you, sir, as well. So you can a bit share of what you do in the mental health space, and then I'll break it up in some questions.
My name is Harriet Adamson, and I am a mental health therapist in the state of Maryland. I'm licensed as a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I have my own practice where I'm actually working with clients. And I just finished a position where I was auditing mental health professionals all across the state. So there's lots and lots of violence, domestic violence in the state. I'm a paper person. I'm from that era where I believe in having a piece of paper. So I printed out some information about domestic violence. Can somebody come and pass these out for me? Thank you. All right, got some on the side. So domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and/or abusive behavior as part of a systemic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. It includes physical violence, sexual violence, threats, emotional, psychological abuse, and the frequency of it is across all socioeconomic levels. It doesn't matter about poverty. It doesn't matter about culture. It can affect just about anyone. As I said, it can show up in physical abuse, and a lot of people believe if you're not physically abused, then, or you don't have some type of bruise, or you haven't been beaten, then you've not experienced domestic violence. That's not true. It can be sexual, psychological, verbal, emotional, financial, and religious. It's just incredible how many ways it shows up.
Okay, That's good to hear. Dr. Dingula, what type of work have you been doing in terms of domestic violence, and what does it look like in the Swahili speaker space? What are they telling you domestic violence is to them, and what are the challenges?
First, let me thanks for the Swahili Society America for organizing this panel discussion. My name is Dr. Patrick Nigula, and as you can see on the board there, I'm from way, Columbia, South Carolina. I've lived there for the past 30 years. Originally, I'm from Tanzania, and Msukuma. I'm from the northern part region of Tanzania. Coming back to your question about domestic violence with respect to the Swahili speakers, for the past 4 years, I've been involved extensively with the refugees from Democratic Republic of Congo. And I've worked very close with them, and I've seen them very close because all of them, they resettle in one apartment complex. So they coming in or they resettle with a large number of the family members from 5 to 8 children. So it's different from a lot of us who have came here to this country as in individuals, but the vast majority of them, when they resettle in United States, as the State Department data shows that they're coming in a very large number of the family members. So they're coming in with their husband and children, but the one thing that is missing to respond to your question is the understanding of the way how the American culture, how they supposed to treat their wives and their children. So you find out that their parents, they continue to use the same, I'll say, not the behavior, but the way how they practice back home, either abusing their wives, their children, either by hitting them, as Miss Harriet alluded a few minutes ago. So I think that's I can say for the past 3 or 4 years that I have experienced in my community in South Carolina with respect to the refugees from DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And another thing is, to add on that is, I think the challenges that we are facing in that area, particularly in Colombia, South Carolina, is the availability of the resources that to help them, to teach them, as the past speakers, they have alluded a few minutes ago, with respect to the resources from the counties. And I hope the county people, they are not here, with respect, maybe the census will identify those areas. And so there's so many things that I think the involvement of the county and the state level and the federal levels to have the programs and the resources that will teach and educate them with respect in that area.
So what I'm hearing is that domestic violence is, in and of itself, comes off in different ways. So there's sexual violence, there's economic violence, there is religious violence, and when I say violence, I mean abuses, correct? And you were saying you're working with refugees, and those are people who've come from violent spaces already. And so when they're coming in from a country that had civil war, and they're in a relationship again that has violence in it as well, and then they move to the United States where you believe that your rights will be protected, and they're still in the culture of violence, so to speak. So in your work, when you're talking to your clients and you are helping your clients come in, and they're bringing in these type of conversations, what are the types of tools you're giving them to be able to, get themselves out of that violent space?
That's the very good question. What I have done for the past 3 years, that's the very good question. What I've done for the past 3 years, I have mobilized and organizing them, and since they speak Swahili, that's the beauty about it. We just established the organizations for the, we don't call it the refugees, but we have twisted around as the diasporas in Columbia, South Carolina. So we do have a meeting. We have our schedule throughout the year. We meet at the library. They give us a space there. So I volunteer my time and trying to teach them as much as they can. For the past a couple weeks ago, we have started the program that to educated women, because if you educated women, then they can take the message back to their husbands back home. So there's a lot of work to be done because I don't get a lot of support from Africans or Tanzanians or Kenyans, but I'm trying to reach out to encourage some of our people from East Africa. And I brought a friend of mine here, Elia. He's working with me very close from Columbia, South Carolina, and we try to reach out to as many people to help this community. And because think about it, think about all of you here. When you came to this country, you just came as one. But for them, they come here in a family, in a huge family. So my main focus is to teach the children, because those children are the future leaders. So those are the ones who they'll become doctors, engineers, attorneys, maybe the future president of the United States.
That's really good. So you're speaking in terms of a kind of community approach. So you're doing awareness program,
Absolutely.
which Governor Hogan and you may have been working on here in the state of Maryland. To you, Ms. Adamson, you're a mental health professional here in Laurel in Prince George's County. And you see clients who come in to talk to you about mental health issues vis-a-vis domestic violence. What types of tools or what types of ways are you helping your clients seek the help they need to where they're in healthier spaces? And before you go into that, what does a healthy relationship look like?
I'm glad you asked. I actually brought another handout for you guys on what a healthy relationship does look like. And one of the things I do with my clients is I try to get them to understand what some of the myths that are involved. Where'd the lady go? Thank you. Thank you. That are involved with, there you go. That are believed about what abuse is and what abuse is not. So basically just trying to, again, educate, letting them know that there's all different kinds of things, and a lot of the things we've heard, such as women are not, it's about education or about self-esteem. A lot of those things aren't accurate or true, that domestic violence comes from other resources or from other places, can come from substance abuse issues, can come from just being culturally accepted. That's one of the things, as I did do some research, I understood, and just even here in America, that a lot of, especially in African American communities, it's just accepted that by men and women, that domestic abuse is okay, to try and control people or manipulate people to do, what someone else wants them to do. So definitely educating them to know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable and what rights they have in this country. Not sure about what they may do in Tanzania, but I know it's against the law to abuse someone here in this country, and you have rights. And if you feel abused, then it's definitely something. And I know now when we go to our doctors, whether you go to a gynecologist or just your regular doctor, they will ask you, are you in an abusive relationship? Because that is something that is important in this area, in this county, and in this state.
So you share, you've shared a form here defining what healthy relationships look like.
Yes.
Such as encouraging relationships with family and friends. So in there are instances where you meet a person, for example, a woman who's, is your friend, she's being abused by her husband, and you're the friend, and you've seen it as a pattern going on for a while, and you don't know the best way to help your friend, right? And you understand the cultural nuances of where the person is married and there's a fear of, first of all, there's a stigma of marriage, right? So when you're a woman in the African culture, if you're not married, you're looked down on, right? And then the stigma of being married, and now you're being married, and you've been married maybe for 5 years or so, and you're experiencing intimate partner violence, domestic violence from your partner, meaning, withholding funds from you or hitting you or, things of that nature. And you have a friend who's been going through this, but she's scared of having a marriage that has failed.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
And so for you, Dr. Ngula, what are the types of things that you've seen in the space in terms of, do you see clients coming in, bringing other friends to come in and seek help? Or is it more of, people not within the Swahili culture or the refugee section who are bringing in clients to come in and seek help?
Well, that's again is very good questions. Speaking in reference to the refugees and the individuals outside the communities of the refugees, The subject of the domestic violence, I think, as Ms. Harriet has indicated here a few minutes ago, it's one of the area that it is very hard to see as individuals, particularly the women, because they tend to hide those feelings, because some of them, they don't want to relinquish their relationship with their partners. So to respond to your question is, I'll just give you an incident that happened in the refugees community that I serve in Columbia, South Carolina. There's a case now, I'll call it a case, within a community of the refugees from Congo. A 79 years old male is married to a 45 years old refugees. They have 6 children, and the lady, she just decided to departed from that relationship because of the abuses that she's received from her husband. And I'm part of that, what do we call it, the elder group who are litigated or try to bring the lady back home. So it's really hard because the gentleman, he's trying to use the traditional ways of solving the problem, but I have advised them to go and seek some legal actions, either to separate it or to seeking for legal counsel. So I do receive some of those cases, and one of them that we are working on it now. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago we met, but we couldn't reach the decisions. So it's really hard to find a solution for that.
Okay, that's really good to hear. So I wanted to point out to the audience if you have any questions. I know that really speaking about domestic violence is, is scary, right? And sometimes you're in a public space, and right now we're in a space where there's men and women, right? And that also can make it a little bit challenging to where you can actually voice those questions. So is there anyone in the room who has a question about domestic violence? Do they know someone who's experienced it? You don't have to say you know who has experienced it, but do you have any questions for the panelists? I mean, we have 2 professionals, one who's worked with refugees, and we have a mental health professional who actually sees clients on a day-to-day basis and offers resources. I have a question at the back.
Good afternoon. Very excited to be here. My name is Diana. And my question is, we normally speak a lot when it comes to domestic violence towards women and children, or women in general, but we don't really pay attention to men. I think it's also something that it's ignored in our society, Tanzania or Africa, or Black people especially, when a gentleman has, going through domestic violence via his spouse, and it's like difficult for him to come forward, or even if to mention it. He can mention to his other fellas of like, you soft, or this. So I believe that we need an awareness for that as well. But have you ever come across where a man can come and seek that help? And what do you do about it to raise the awareness for men as well?
Okay, I have had a client, and one of the things that is happening is a lot of the terms are changing. So it's considered intimate partner violence now, and it's not just men and women, or it's or heterosexual couples, it's homosexual couples also. And yes, there are men who are abused, and it may not be physical, but there's definitely emotional violence. There's sexual violence. A lot of women withhold sex from their spouses, and that can be very, very detrimental or harmful to the relationships. So yes, it is out there. And again, as I said, because violence or abuse isn't just physical. So, I mean, what if your woman or the female in the relationship makes more money? And, in this area, you've got a lot of females who make good money. And the male partner is struggling physically or financially, and the female is controlling everything. So it is out there on all those different levels. One of the things I've tried to work with those couples with is being able to see things from the other person's perspective. And again, trying to be, kinder, and, and work, communicate and work in that relationship from where they started, because no one ever starts. Most people, let's say, most couples don't start with abuse, but it can find its way in to the relationship. So, yes.
Well, I don't want to spoil the pot. Miss Elliott, she has responded, I think, to your question very eloquently. And I think it's very rare to find a male or man in Swahili speakers approached the elders, or particularly in my community of the refugees from Congo. But most of the time you find the females. I agree with you, but we need to focus and educate our people in our communities. That's the number one thing that I will think. And in Columbia, South Carolina, what I'm planning to do is once I finish or complete the training with the refugees from Congo women, then I'll mobilize and organizing their husband now, and I'll bring them together and start to educate them with respect to respect their wives, respecting their families. And one thing that, in addition to add on that, what I found out is if we move those the refugees from Congo living in an apartment complex and put them in houses, maybe that will pretty much build what we call it the family homes, and then they will start living maybe a better life and be able to respect their wives. And one thing that I have done so far, I've helped 6 families now. They purchased their first homes. We closed 2 houses last month, and then in the end of this month we're going to close maybe another 2 houses. And think about it, these individuals, they were living in a very violent country in the DRC, and then they went back to Tanzania and living in a camp, in Nyarugusu camp for between 20 to 30 years, and then now they are living in a home, a beautiful home. So before we came here, Elia and I, we went through a walkthrough for one of the family. We showed them the house, they're about to purchase the house, and then if everything just goes well, they will be in the house, and then they will start living a healthy family. Yeah, I think that's there you go.
So in the earlier, I'll get to you. In the earlier presentation, Naama was talking about, when immigrants move to the United States and the challenges of being an immigrant in the United States, meaning you're working, you're trying to make sure that you have a better job, you're providing for your family, or, there's a lot of frustrations that are going through the struggles of being an immigrant in the United States. And I wonder, would those attribute to violence in relationships, so to speak? So if there's a challenge where you're going through trying to make the money and, you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not you're not having a good, loving relationship in your marriage, and you come back home every day and there's challenges in those relationships, and then you have challenges at work, you're not making enough money. Do those kinds of things add to and so to speak, push the envelope in terms of creating a hostile space in the home?
Absolutely. And then one of the things that I've noted, absolutely, one of the things that I've noted with that particular community is you'll find the husbands are working really hard, like a 12-hour shift for 7 days. And then they'll use alcohol and beers as a substitute to let's say suppress, is the right word to use, the anxiety of the stress. And then what I'm trying to do is to educate them. The alcohol and beer, it's not the solution for that. And that's why we are organizing a training for that particular communities. And I think it will help, in conjunction with the housing project I'm working with them, to move them out of the apartment complex and to start own homes and have that investments that their children, when they're coming from school, they come into the house, and it's a big dream for them. Living from the tents or camps and come to live in the house in America, that will elevate their values. And sometimes their use will inch up their values. And I think that's the motto I'm using in Colombia. And then I hope some of the listeners here will take this lesson and take back to their communities and reach out not only to the refugees, but to the Tanzanians or Kenyans, and trying to implement this model that we're using in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm willing to help, but it requires a lot of work to do it, sacrifice and time. But the end goal of this is trying to elevate our communities and to be at the level where we'll claim that at least we're in the middle class family, because we're way behind the level of the wealth here in America, especially the people from East Africa.
Good afternoon, Swahili families. I'm fine. Are you okay too? There is coronavirus moving around, so watch out. No, I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah. They announced yesterday that coronavirus is in the Montgomery County. We have 3 patients there. So in whichever way you go, take note of that. It was in Wuhan, China. It's now here. So take note of that. My name is Amos Cherihani. I'm one of the community members, and I have a question to ask the panelists pertaining to the issue of domestic violence, abuse, rape, things like that, as far as the Swahili community and the people who are migrating from Africa to here is concerned. There are cultures that we have been to and that we are used to from where we came from that are regarded as just normal cultures. But when we come here, they are counted as an abuse, domestic violence, and things of that like. That when you do it back home is okay. When you do it here is an abuse. I can even give an example. Please do. I have never heard, I've been living in Tanzania in Africa for like 40 years. I have never heard a husband raping his wife. Hello? I have never heard that a kid has misbehaved and then punished, and then it becomes as a violence to a kid. Child abuse, things like that. But when you do it here, it's a mess. Your own wife can take you to court for raping her. So, as a panelist, how do you approach this controversy that I have moved from Africa with my wife, only to find that I'm a rapist to my own wife, things that have never happened? Thank you.
I think break down what rape is, and then in the marriage. So we'll have Ms. Adamson break it down.
Rape is considered not giving consent to have sex. That's just the basic bottom line. You know, you want to have it, I don't. A lot of times people think of it again as violence, but it can be more just power. I have the authority, you as my wife, to be able to have sex with you when I want to. But you as the wife can say, I don't feel like having sex, my head hurts. So again, it's about consenting. And you're right, as I did research, it's the norm in a lot of the African countries that the husband, it's just expected that the husband has control. And it's not just from the male perspective, it's from the female perspective also, that it's okay to control the wife by either abusing, well, I won't say abuse, but, you know, putting your hands on her in some form or fashion. But as we say here, when in America, you do as the Americans do. When in Rome, you do as the Romans do. So yes, I know you're bringing those traditions and cultural things with you from Africa that's accepted. And I did research. One of the things that came up with was, you know, here again, like you said, it's illegal. At home, it's something, or I'm back at home, and I'm not even African. I'm African. Anyway, but back at home, it's considered something that we work with in the community. So the community leaders try to help people to change their thinking. Again, educating to help them to understand that you have better relationships when you don't beat up your wife. And that it's better for you as a family if, you know, you're able to talk about things and understand things from a different perspective. So yes, it's changing. I think one of the statistics I found was that back in the early 2000s, it was like 50% of abuse, or what was considered domestic abuse. But that number is decreasing because the countries are changing and they realize, yeah, they're being more educated and realize that it's just not as beneficial. And then you're right, you come here to America and there's a whole different level of expectation. So definitely, if you're having a problem, then seek out counseling, seek out elders here in America, someone in your culture who could potentially give you some guidance as to how to work better with your wife and your kids. Does that help? Yes, certainly. He wants. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is an issue of cultural values.
Yes.
Now, as I alluded earlier in my presentation, we differ in our traditional values, and I think what Patrick is going through, or what you said, education will be the most important thing here. In that and that education is when the immigrants come here. Then there's a need for them to get educated to blend into the American dominant values. Because I remember when I was coming up here, I thought everything was just like in Tanzania. I'm gonna give an example, and it's part of the value. When I was doing my undergrad, way back in the 80s, one professor just invited me for a lunch. That was like a Friday after class, and he told me, "Oh, can we go to lunch?" I said, "Oh, yeah." Because the connotation there was like in Africa, when somebody invites you to go and have food or drink, the expectation is that the one who invited you is responsible to pay. While here, it's not. So I had that lunch. Now, I'm telling you, and it's real. And people really need to know. It's part of the intercultural communication here. So being aware of what's going on in this country, so you can fix yourself better and interact meaningfully. So I had that lunch, and after that, you know, I got up and walked out quickly to go and wait for him but he came running to me. "Oh, come on, Nick, come on." I said, "What?" "So you gotta pay." I said, "Pay?" I'm like, and truly, at that time, things were cheaper, but I had only $5, and that lunch was $3. I was able to pay. How about if I didn't have the money to do that? You know? So what you're talking there about violence and all these things, those who are here, women and male, have got to be educated. The expectation of how abuse is being defined here and how they should live. We cannot just blame them because they don't know. Because if a man in Africa wants to make love to her wife, or his wife, whatever. So if the woman refuses, that's a license to divorce that woman. Yeah, that's very derogatory. Cannot do that.
So I understand the conversation we're having. But I just want to make it clear. Consent is important. A woman has a right to say no. And even as your wife, she has a right to say no. A man has a right to say no, right? We're not saying.
And that education needs to be given before.
Yes, it has to be. So when we're looking at really educating about domestic violence, mental health, property rights, things of that nature, we have to engender both men and women. We have to engender both boys and girls. And that's really important so that we are creating healthier communities. So it's one thing to come in and educate the woman on what exactly a healthy relationship looks like. The challenge begins when she goes back at home. The person she's living with doesn't know what a healthy relationship looks like. So again, she's living in the cycle of an unhealthy relationship. So as we do this work of educating and informing, we have to bring men to the conversation. So this is actually great that we're having it in this space. Whether by force or not, or by choice, the men are in here and they wanted to learn what it looks like. And the women are confident to still sit in their seats and listen to the conversation and hear what the men are saying. That's how we become more empowered and more informed, right? And so I really want to go back again to domestic violence. Naima was talking about depression and anxiety earlier in the previous panel. The way you are raising your family as a couple and you have children is really important. You're a steward of those children. So if the space you're creating for your children is unhealthy, your children will come and begin to have illnesses, and illnesses such as depression and anxiety. So you find, for example, there's a couple that's married, they look perfect in their photographs, they look great. On Facebook, they look fantastic, but one of them is violent, right? One of them is abusing their partner. And their children, when they see the person who's abusing their other parent, is scared of even talking to their parent. What happens again? Now the person who's being abused is being accused of making the children not be respectful. So there's a cycle. There's an actual cost to intimate partner violence that we really need to be cognizant of as a community and as a society. In Kenya, yes, you could come in and you would punch your wife and go back and go to work. You go sit with your guys at the local bar, you're drinking and you're saying, yeah, I told her and she said no, and this is exactly what you did. And then your friends are sitting with you drinking and they're telling me, exactly, she's a woman, you're the king of the house. This is how things are supposed to be done, right? This is the truth. This is the truth of what we're living in. But that's not actually healthy, right? The unfortunate part is that now you have children, right? Those children are going to have the same relationship you have, right? It's a cycle. So not only are you carrying unhealthy spaces, unhealthy habits, you're carrying healthy habits. If you are drinking in the house, if you're an alcoholic, you see your teenagers start drinking, you say, oh, it's America, right? No, they picked that bad habit from you. And why are you drinking? What is the reason why you're abusing alcohol, right? In the mental health space, there's co-carrying issues, right? And I'm learning as a co-founder of Africans for Mental Health. You could have depression and you could also be an alcoholic. Those are co-carrying, right? Why is it co-occurring? You're using alcohol to numb something that's been going on in your life. You're much older. You don't want to talk about the way you grew up. But the way you grew up really affects who you are as an adult, right? So, if you grew up in a violent space, that stuff comes up when you're an adult. It comes up as an illness. It comes up as depression. It comes up as anxiety. And then there's other forms of mental illnesses, bipolar. There is, schizophrenia. There's different forms of illnesses. So the subject of creating a healthy community is very important. It's important to be kind. So when your wife says no, she said no. When your husband has said no, she said no. The burden of having a family is placed really hard on a woman. And I'll break it down to you. I'm from Kenya, yes. When a woman is getting married in different communities, she's taught how to be a good wife. She's taught how to cook. She's taught how to please her husband. That's what happens. But there is no space that teaches men how to be good husbands. There isn't? No. How are men learning to be good husbands? No. How? Because nobody wants to talk about how to be a good husband. They think that by osmosis, the men will learn, right? And
to be honest, I mean, that's not universal anyway.
yes, but so
Let me tell
go
you,
ahead.
That's not universal. Because I grew up in a good family. My father was a pastor, and I never saw my father hit my mother. So we still have people like that. Very good at, respect, everything. That's what we are taught. But you can make a lot of distinctions here. It's not easy to get something that is uniform. There are so many elements of abuse, though. That's what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is we can dwell so much in Africa. I'm thinking about the people who come up here, that they need that education and to see the difference between where they come from and where they are right now. Because this is where they're having challenges here, right here. Yeah. So these are things that they need to be needs to be talked, and there must be a big outreach program where they can all be educated, children and men, everybody, so they can follow expectation of this country, the traditional values of here. That's what we're dealing with. So when they go home, that's a different thing. When they go to Africa, I mean, there are people who are really nice there. There are people who really don't abuse their wife, depending on how we make the interpretation here in the U.S.
Good to be in a space where, that's why we're here, and that's why we have speakers who are Americans, and we have speakers who are from the continent of Africa. So I know Ms. Adamson had something she wanted to add on in terms of the conversation we had earlier. Yes. And then, you bring up different conversations that need additional seminars.
So from do it another time.
We'll do,
exactly.
yeah.
Do another time. So one of the things I did think about as far as this whole conversation is going, Dr. Boaz mentioned a very good point. There's not a lot of good training, period. And as my brother said, Amos, right? Yes. Brother Amos. Yes. So that's where we come back to what we do in our households. It's important to start at home. Training starts at home. If you've got a good husband and a good wife and there is no abuse, then you train those children to be good husbands and good wives. If you're beating your wife and your wife is beating you as a husband, then that's what the children see, and that's what they do when they get in their own relationships. So again, having a healthy home is a good foundation. Yes, we have a lot of single family homes, which it's just not the best. That is not the way God intended it, but it is what it is. And again, as fathers, do your best with those children, whether you're in the home or without. Mothers, do your best with those children in or out of the home. Have them interact with positive male influences. Have them, not everybody, but most of us have brothers or uncles or cousins or something. And we all are aware of people who are good people. So again, try to interact as much. If you can get them into boys' clubs or church events or whatever it is to help them to be good people. I believe good people create good people, exactly. One of the things, another piece of paper I did have was about resources. If you find yourself or you know someone who's in a situation that's not healthy, then the state of Maryland has a fact sheet. Again, it has an assessment on the front. Then it also has numbers on the back. I realized as I was working with teenagers, there are a lot of teenagers that are currently in abusive relationships. It starts early because that's what they see at home. So training them to know that that's not healthy, and hopefully as our young women are trained, our young men will be trained, and we will all have a better culture right here, right now.
All right.
Okay? All right?
No, hold on. So I just want to tie in the conversations we're having. So consent is yes and no, right?
Yes.
Right. And the reason why we want to make sure we reiterate that is that, you know, in the space of marriage and family, you have your children, you have your daughters, and you have your sons. When they go out there and they're in other relationships outside of you, consent is no and yes. It's not a blurry line. If it's a blurry line, they find themselves in jail. So it's important that you reiterate that point and you establish those boundaries, right? There are resources out here. There's mental health professionals. You know, NEMA is one in the community that you're familiar with. Ms. Adamson is here. Dr. Higa is here as well. So those resources are available. There are churches that you can go to get that kind of resource to be healthier. They safe spaces of getting help, where if you're in a violent space and you're being abused, you can reach out for help and still be protected. In the state of Maryland, there's an address where once you are a person who is been in a violent relationship, there's a safe address for you. So the state of Maryland has, through the governor's office, they've been able to create that resource where if somebody's sending you mail, the person who's been abusing you is not going to be able to find you. And so this conversation is much bigger. It ties in with mental health. It ties in with, you know, substance abuse. It ties in with census, making sure you're counted so that Prince George's County is going to get the money they need to provide the resources we all need to be a healthier community. So I'll let Libe take over, and thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Asante, asante sana. Thank you, everybody. I would like to acknowledge two people. Grace Mring, Grace, stand up. Yes. Grace and Nema Orari. Nema, stand up. Everything you see in this room, those two. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank all the panelists from Governor's Office, from South Carolina, from Laurel, Maryland, Dr. Boaz from University of District of Columbia, Dr. Mwak, and everybody else. Then most of all, I want to thank Elvis. Elvis is a great guy. I've been working with him like for a year now, I think. He's very cooperative. You call him, you text him, he texts you right back. And he calls you, he pushes you, and I push him back. But one thing for sure, making one flyer in collaboration with county, it takes forever. They have to send you back and forth, correct this. It's tough. So thank you, Elvis, and thank you, Mr. Thompson. One more thing. We have our social media accounts. We have Twitter, we have Instagram, and a Facebook page. If it's okay, we can have your census information on our social media. We don't have a lot of followers on our Twitter. We have like 800 plus followers on Instagram, and we have 26,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. So you can use our resources for everything. Last but not least, we'll be sending out announcements for our upcoming activities, Swahili Society America. And everybody who is here, we have you on a camera. Unfortunately, we had to take your names. Our coming events, you will have 20% discount for the coming event. Thank you so much. Welcome to Swahili Society America.
Can I add something? I wanted to say, Elvis Denner is from Prince George's, and I'm Prince George's proud.
Right.
Well, don't say PG, please. When you're out.
Okay, Prince George's.
Prince George's County.
County.
And his position is the first in the county. So he's from Liberia. The position that's been created for African Diaspora Liaison is a first ever in Prince George's County. So he's doing a great job.
Yeah, he is. Thanks a lot. So these are social media accounts, website, and everything.
For those of you who might not have, who maybe didn't get your name, but if you could just text us
Yeah, just text.
on WhatsApp, just with your name, your email address, and your obviously phone number, or email us, and we can kind of include you for that discount.
For the upcoming discounts.
The July event.
Just say clearly, when is this coming?
It's going to be July 11th.
Let's talk about the July event.
Would you like me to talk about the July 11th event? Briefly? Okay, it's going to be a great event. We're going to start on Friday, July 10th. On July 10th, we're going to have Swahili comedy evening. We're going to have comedian from East Africa, Swahili speakers on Friday. Then we're going to have dance gala on that Friday. It's going to be really fun. And on Saturday, all afternoon, we have panel discussions, education. Because on Swahili Society America, we educate, we knowledge sharing, we entertain, all this stuff, but most of all, education. So we're going to have Swahili panel discussions all day on Saturday. Then in the evening, we're going to have dinner gala, and we have award and a lot of things. We have vendors. On Sunday, July 12th, we're going to have outside big event, festival. It's going to be soccer tournament and Swahili food festival. So we invite all vendors, whoever does Swahili food, bring your own food. Then, in Swahili Society America, tunawezeshana kiuchumi pia. Utauza vitu vyako. We empower everybody. Thanks a lot, and you guys have a blessed weekend.